It's episode 11 of the Handy Homebrew Show.
Wait. We have to change the sign.
What?
We're not making beer, are we?
I'm making beer. I didn't think.
Okay,
we're making beer. Why are we making beer today? Why is it the making beer episode?
Well, we're getting close.
We're almost done.
We're almost done.
It's taken us 2 months to explain a 4-hour-long brew process and then a 2-week-long fermentation process.
Right.
We've made beer slow.
Yeah.
It was already slow. We've made it
slower. We've actually slowed the process to a crawl.
Which I didn't think was possible because it's not a fast thing. This is not instant gratification when you make beer.
No.
Today we're talking about what is happening in our fermenter,
right?
With our yeast, with our cooled and chilled wort. Some issues we might come up. And some things that you can do during that time in the fermenter to make your beer better.
Right, during the fermentation. So first thing I want to talk about is equipment.
Okay.
Because you all know I love toys.
Love toys. Gadgets. Guy loves gadgets.
So we're going to talk about the most simple fermenter, probably the cheapest also.
Bucket.
5-gallon bucket.
Bucket.
Yeah.
I still use buckets.
Make sure it's food safe though.
Yes.
Not the Lowe's or Home Depot. Right, yeah. You have to be careful because it's
Get a whole $12 bucket, not a $3 bucket.
Yes, exactly. Bucket, lid, and an airlock. And you know what? Some people don't even use airlocks.
No, I've seen it. I've seen some people just have like a cloth that they can put over the top and they leave the lid off gently and it can still escape.
Right.
They think that stuff can't get underneath it, and that's fine.
Yeah.
It's absolutely fine.
And
then you've got carboys.
You've
got plastic better bottles that look like carboys, but they're made of plastic, not as heavy.
Right.
Carboy's a little bit breaky. I don't use a lot of carboys anymore. But those are a little bit more expensive. You're looking about the $30, $40 range now. They will last longer, and glass is a lot better to ferment in than plastic.
Right.
You don't have to ever get rid of it as long as you clean it.
Right.
It's not going to
because you won't scratch it.
Yes, you're not going to scratch it. That's the problem with plastic is it's scratched.
Yeah.
And then you can boost up from there. I have an SS brew bucket, which is a stainless steel bucket, pretty much.
Do you think we could show that picture right
there? Done. Movie magic, people.
Okay.
We also
what I use.
What do you got?
Is called a fast ferment, and it's a plastic conical fermenter, and I love this thing.
Yeah.
I had some problems at first with getting the lid to seal, but it's okay.
They fixed that problem.
Figured out right. They
got the seal. Talked to the company and they fixed it.
Yeah. The best thing about it is it has a detachable yeast ball that you saw on the bottom of the picture. Yeah. You can shut your valve and you can take that yeast ball off and you can save that yeast for the very next beer that you do. So you can
do your secondary, which we'll talk about that in a second, in the same exact container, not have to transfer.
Right.
Because you can take your yeast off. That's what a secondary is, and we'll get that there in a second. Right. So here's what's happening, guys. We have transferred our wort into whatever fermenter you got. Better bottle, carboy, half a barrel stainless steel conical, whatever you want. I would love to have one of those. Don't have it.
Right.
We need to prepare our wort for the yeast, though. Yeast won't do its job for about 8 hours to 24 hours.
Right.
Your wort has to have oxygen. We talked about that earlier. There's a few different ways. You can whip it around real good.
That's what I use. I use my brew spoon.
Just whip it around. Sanitize the spoon. I use Venturi. So when I pump through, it goes up and back down, but I have an opening actually in my tubing.
So it kind of sucks air in.
It sucks air through a filter and it bubbles it up when it goes in there. So in my 5-second transfer, some people have oxygen stones attached to oxygen tanks. 1 minute of that, you got all the oxygen you'll ever need.
Oh, yeah.
Without oxygen, your yeast can't do their job. So make sure it's aerated. So we got an aerated wort, chilled wort. We got our yeast in it.
Now we've pitched our yeast.
We've pitched our yeast. Now, pitching your yeast is important. If you pitch it too hot, you could kill your yeast.
Right.
If you pitch it too cold, your yeast will fall asleep. So I like to pitch right about the temperature that my beer will be fermenting. So 68 degrees, I like to be within about 5 degrees either way.
Yeah. So a lot of people say, it's okay to pitch your yeast if your wort's still a little bit hot. Well,
not too hot.
You got to make sure that it's not too hot. And I would say anything over 80 degrees, I'd never pitch my yeast. Anything over
75
80 degrees.
maybe. 75 maybe. I might pitch.
Yeah.
But it won't damage. It'll get them all riled up. They'll be warm and ready to go.
Right.
And you don't want to pitch too low because they go and they sink right to the bottom. Even in a lager, we pitch a little bit warmer, about mid-60s, and then we slowly cool it down over 8 hours, and then it's ready to do its thing. But don't pitch in hundreds. You'll kill it.
No, you'll kill it instantly.
90s, people are like, oh, I pitch in 90s all the time. Why play with it, though?
Yeah,
you just spent all that time. Take an extra 3 minutes to get it down 10 more degrees.
Yeah.
Don't flirt with it. So we got yeast, we got aerated wort. Let's talk temperature.
Yeah. Time and temps. That's the biggest thing. I don't follow any rule about time except for this one. My beer sits in the fermenter for 14 days.
2 weeks.
That's it.
It's usually done fermenting by then, too.
Sure it is.
But the yeast, even if it's done making the alcohol, the yeast still have a job to do.
Right.
Yeast is not done. I've had beers ferment out in 3 days.
Oh, yeah, I have too, for sure.
You're not drinking that beer good after 3 days, though.
No.
The yeast still does things. It doesn't just convert. At least yeast cleans things up and filters things out, and it gets churning in there. So yeast aren't just alcohol makers. Yeast are your workhorses.
Right.
They do all the work. So
I guess let me clarify. I don't do... When I'm doing an ale, I do 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
2 weeks and that's it.
How long was your Pilsner?
It took 4 weeks on the Pilsner. But
why?
The way we did it is we started at 68 degrees, pitched the yeast, brought it down to 52 degrees in a fermentation chamber.
And the lower it is, the slower it is.
Right. And so we gave that 3 weeks at 52 degrees, and then we raised the temperature to about 63 65 degrees.
Over a couple days.
Yeah, over a couple days, and let that sit for a week. And what that's doing is gets that yeast back excited and kind of cleans up after itself. And then...
Drop it out.
Drop it to about 37
That's called
degrees.
cold crashing.
Right.
You cold crash to make all the yeast go completely to sleep. You collect them at the bottom.
Right.
This is where your yeast ball comes in.
Right.
And for me, I got to transfer because now your beer is clearer and the yeast is out. Now...
Right.
We're going to get to this a little bit more, but if you're bottle conditioning, if you're bottling your beer with corn sugar to carbonate it, don't cold crash.
Right. You still need that
yeast
to still be in suspension.
Even those tired little yeasts are in there. When you put 12 ounces in a bottle, when you fill this little bottle up and you got a little tiny bit of corn sugar down there and you cap it and do like this, that yeast is like, we got more stuff to eat, guys. Get back to it. And they carb your beer up perfectly.
Yep.
Don't cold crash. I've seen people cold crash a little bit. They'll cold crash for like a day just to get a lot. And sometimes that'll work. But you really kind of want to, your first couple of batches, don't cold crash at all. See how it looks. Then after you've carbonated it, you can cold crash in a bottle.
Sure.
And then when you pour, you're going to have a little bit of yeast film at the bottom. Just don't pour it in your glass. It's fine. You'll still get a clear little beer, and it'll be carbonated perfectly naturally using the sugars and the yeast. So cold crashing is a fun little thing. Now, you've been saying secondary. We've been saying primary.
Right.
What's the difference?
So basically, primary is the first fermentation stage that happens. The yeast are going crazy.
Giving off CO2, leaking, making alcohol.
Your airlock's going crazy. And that's where you're seeing all of the action.
Yeah, very exciting time.
Right.
You can hear it.
Yeah.
Blow off tubes are just bubbling.
You can smell it sometimes.
You can smell it. I'm an airlock sniffer.
Yeah.
I won't say sorry about it.
Yeah, I am.
I'll be like, oh, it's cold. It's so good. But when that's chugging along, that's the exciting part. That's primary. Now, it being done making the alcohol doesn't mean primary is done. Your primary for your Pilsner took a month.
Right.
You still had to clean up the beer by raising it back up, stepping it up, and then you cold crash it to get that beer. So that's a long process for a primary.
Right.
And then after that is what?
After that's the secondary. And so let's just talk about an ale. You primary for a week. Mm-hmm. And I've followed this rule since I started homebrewing, and it works. So I don't do anything different.
Yeah.
Primary for 1 week. Secondary for 1 week.
Okay.
And all you're doing after the primary is you're racking or transferring that beer off of the yeast cake at the bottom and going into a secondary vessel.
Okay.
There's still yeast in there, and that yeast that's in there is still doing work. All you're doing is getting the beer off of that yeast at the bottom.
You can get off flavors from beers sitting on yeast too long.
Right.
It takes a while, though, guys. I'll tell you, it's never happened to me. I've left beers in primary, ales included, for a month because it was slow action. It took a while to I took gravity readings to make sure I was done. If you get the same gravity reading 3 days in a row, your beer is fermented out. That does not mean it's done.
Doesn't mean it's done.
Just means it's fermented out.
Right.
It could still be cleaning it up, taking some of those, diacetyl is a thing that the yeast likes to grab onto, and it weighs it down for you. So there's a lot of jobs that the yeast can be doing. But that secondary, you've taken most of it off, so now the yeast won't harm your beer.
Right.
It can, but it's fair. It's hard to do, guys. You really have to not be paying attention. Now, in secondary, you can do some fun things.
Secondary, you can do some fun things. Dry hop.
Dry hop. Gotta love the IPAs. You get all that. All aroma. You can also, if you're doing coffee beers, you can dry bean. You can throw beans in there. Extracts go in there.
Oh, yeah.
Fruits. People put fruits in. Lavender. That's where you get aroma. Aroma is the secondary. Right. Oh, you're getting all that aroma. You're getting all that. You crack open a beer like, wow, that smells like vanilla bean. That's because it was in secondary. The vanilla bean would have boiled out had you put it in your boil.
Or, wow, that smells like grapefruit. Or it smells like... melon or
peaches.
Lemon or
just a peach
orange,
wheat, some fun stuff like that. You're doing it in secondary. Now your beer has alcohol, so it's semi-protecting itself, but you still want to sanitize whatever you're putting in there. So if you're doing purees and stuff, I like to throw them in the freezer for a little while. Let the ice, in a sealed container, it kind of breaks up the muddled fruits and stuff, and I pitch the whole thing right in.
Right.
And now the alcohol will have enough alcohol not to let anything infect it or something like that.
Yep.
I don't use any rinds. I clean the some people will puree and boil it.
Yeah.
They'll boil a puree.
Yeah.
When I dry hop, I open my bag, I put it in a sanitized muslin sack, and I drop it in. And I've never had a problem with it.
And you know what I dry hop in? Pantyhose.
Pantyhose.
Whole lot cheaper than muslin bags.
The guy owns so many pantyhose.
Pantyhose.
Lots of pantyhose. Yeah. I never even.
I came home and the girlfriend said, "Who's wearing the pantyhose around here?" And I said,
"Don't worry about it.
Don't you worry about that."
Had to get out of a speeding ticket, honey. Don't worry about it. So we've got primary, we've got secondary. Now, during this whole process, we said time. Let's talk temperature.
Okay.
Temperature is important. Now, people, when I first started homebrewing, it was either the temperature of your closet, basement, cabinet. That was all you could do.
Right.
You don't have to break the bank controlling your temperature, though. If you look down in our videos below, there's a super cheap $15 fermentation tank where we actually use water as an insulator.
Right.
You just put your whole bucket down in there. The water with a fish tank heater will click on automatically when it drops below, and it'll keep your beer right. It's not the most sophisticated system.
No.
But if you've got a cold basement in the winter, it will warm it up.
Right.
It'll keep it warm. But right now I use a chest freezer.
Yeah.
Drop it in. I got a thermal probe and an Inkbird dual temp
controller. That's what I've got. I've got a just an old refrigerator.
Yeah.
Guys, Craigslist is a great place to find
$50.
an old refrigerator.
Yeah.
And all you're doing is buying a little heater to put inside of it that controls your heat.
And then it controls its cold. It's a fridge.
Because it's a fridge. Right.
And it clicks it on or off depending on where you want. And don't keep it within a couple degree range.
Yeah.
I've seen people build Arduino RAN systems. Our buddy Christopher runs an Arduino one where it reads 3 different temperature settings outside of the fridge, inside of the fridge, in a probe, and it will cut off within 1/100th of a degree.
Yeah.
Its beer is never... Now, that's the other thing is when your beer is fermenting, the temperature inside's a little bit hotter than you think it's going to be.
Right.
Because the yeast is doing its job.
That yeast is being active and it's going to create heat inside of there.
So you might think, oh, wow, it's 68 on the outside, but it could be 72 on the inside.
Could be.
So I have a little probe in mine where I slide my Inkbird probe in, so I'm inside the liquid.
Right.
And that's another $15 addition, but it's worth it. When you get to the point where you want to make consistent beer, temperature is huge in fermentation.
It is.
And brew different beers at different times when you have more temperature control. Do a Pilsner in the winter when your basement's going to be much cooler.
Right.
Than the summertime when it's going to be 80 degrees.
And do a saison.
Yeah.
Let's go to the other spectrum and talk about a saison. Most of the saison yeast that I've been looking at here recently, I'm going to do a saison here pretty soon.
It's exciting.
Yeah.
Big deal.
They say to start at 75 degrees and start at 68 degrees and ramp up to as high as 90 degrees Fahrenheit.
I got up past 90 on mine.
Did you?
Yeah. And I have no qualms with it because certain yeast need heat. Certain yeast need cold because they do funky things if they don't have it.
Right.
A saison yeast doesn't do its full job unless it's hot, and a lager yeast can't do its job if it gets hot.
Right.
It's not possible. And you get different characteristics. That's why temp is important.
Yeah.
And you may use different yeasts at different temps to get different things in beers. You might use 2 different yeasts in one beer at different temps.
Right.
Because this yeast will clean that out. That yeast will make that. That yeast will create this ester. That yeast will create this flavor that you're looking for, this traditional flavor. So there's yeast is, it's a workhorse. It's a freaking workhorse.
Yeah. Some of the big breweries, they'll actually ferment their beer on a proprietary strain of yeast, transfer it off of that yeast, and then just use some neutral, high gravity
to finish it.
carbonate it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It won't give it any flavors.
Right.
But it's gonna carbonate it up a little bit for you. So there's 1,000 things that you guys can do with yeast. Yeast is fantastic. Now, we talk primary, secondary. There is tertiary. I've never once double racked. I've never gone on a tertiary step. I will keg and then let a beer rest for a couple weeks or a couple months before I carbonate it.
Right.
But other than that, I don't really do tertiary. So once you've got your cooled wort, aerated wort in there, and you've pitched your yeast, guys, you're looking about 2 weeks. 2 weeks, then you can have beer.
Yeah.
You can transfer it during secondary during some of that time, dry hop or some. The reason we don't dry hop in primary, or one of the reasons I don't dry hop in primary is A, dry hopping in secondary, you got to leave it there a little bit longer. It won't be sitting on the yeast.
Right.
So, and I like to wash my yeast, and when you dry hop or dry bean or something, it mixes with the yeast.
Right. Yeah.
And then I just ruin that yeast batch. I can get 4 yeast batches out of that. Why would I throw away good yeast? So I take it off. I take that yeast there. I wash it. I got 4 new things of yeast, and I'll make that beer with it.
Exactly.
But if I start throwing...
It saves you $7 every time you brew.
Every single time.
And yeast is probably next to hops the most expensive part of your beer.
Yeah. And if you have a little yeast bank, I mean, you can keep growing yeast. You can grow it over and over.
Yeah.
Using starters. So we could talk yeast until
forever. Let's talk about troubleshooting.
Okay, what happened?
For fermentation.
What happened?
Okay, so let's just go through a couple scenarios I've actually been through myself.
Okay.
So in 24 to 48 hours, you should start to notice activity in your airlock.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes you don't.
You don't at all.
Don't freak out.
No.
The only way you'll know if you are fermenting or not,
gravity reading.
Give it 3 or 4 days and take the gravity.
My buckets didn't get a good seal. So everything came out the sides, never came through the airlock. I get the stainless steel brew bucket. The airlock goes nuts after 8 hours.
Right.
I've been fermenting beer for years and going, I guess it's fermenting. But it was doing it. Sometimes you can put a light down, not open it, but you can put a light on some of those clear or translucent buckets, and you can see the krausen forming. So if there's no activity, don't freak out.
Yeah.
And if you don't get a reading with activity, wake that yeast up a little bit.
Yeah.
Don't go in there whipping it. Don't go whipping it. Just kind of wake it up. If you want to, get a sanitized spoon and just kind of, I take a racking cane. I've had to do that in the past. Sanitize it.
Yeah.
Open my lid and carefully just kind of get that yeast back into suspension. I'm not working oxygen into it. I don't want to right now.
Right.
But,
buddy,
we're gonna get guest star here. Come here. What's wrong, guest star? Come here.
We got the brew dogs.
Sit down. He's good. Good job. He's protecting us.
Yeah.
Nah, buddy. What'd I say? Come here. Come here.
Anyways,
you got no respect.
So that's one thing I've noticed before.
Airlock inactivity.
Yeah,
that happens a lot.
Don't freak out.
Okay,
it's not a big deal.
It's not a big deal
because if it doesn't show signs of activity and you're not getting any, you can take your readings and it's not moving. That's okay.
Yeah, it's still,
repitch.
Yeah.
I just had to do that.
Yeast. Beer turned out fine.
Yeah.
Beer turned out just fine.
Yeah.
So I've repitched in the past. I've had to wake yeast up. I've had all the issues that everybody's going to have, and they're going to think it's the first time it's ever happened.
Yeah.
Go on homebrewtalk.com. It's happened to 100 brewers before you.
Oh, yeah.
There is so much data out there, and they're so helpful. If you ask something, it'll get answered in an hour.
Oh, yeah.
Somebody's like, dude, I did this back in 96. I was using yeast that I found in a field. And you're like, oh, this guy's got it worse than me. So that's one of the issues. What are the troubleshooting?
So another thing is off flavors.
Temperature.
That's it.
Temperature.
That's it.
90% of the time it's temperature or stressed yeast, which, again, it's hard to underpitch if you're making a starter.
Right.
It's hard. Even right now, I was talking about the Pliny and I was like, hey, I hope it gets under 1020. 1008. It fermented out in 6 days at 1008. So I underpitched, and it still completely got it lower. It's at about 9% alcohol, 9.5% alcohol. But it did the job. Even there, I underpitched by 1/3.
Yeah.
And I'm probably not going to have any off flavors because I don't have that refined of a palate.
Right.
But temperature. If I did have off flavors, it's because of my temperature.
So you said temperature is 90%. I would say the other 10%. Sanitation.
Yep. Not cleaning with the Star San, or excuse me, not sanitizing with Star San, cleaning with PBW or OxyClean mix, not scrubbing too hard in plastic to create grooves where bacteria can live.
Right.
If you're going to clean out plastic stuff, use something soft like a cloth.
Yeah.
Don't use a coarse pad.
Right.
That'll scrape it up.
The other thing, okay, so I'd say 9% is sanitation. Another 1%.
We're down to 1 now.
Yeah. 1% is oxygenation.
Oxidized.
There we go. Oxidized. when you rack, if you transfer your beer from your primary to your secondary, and you go to a second vessel, you don't want that to splash. You don't want air to be introduced into that.
I just put a tube, I put it up on the table, and I run it down carefully. I open it slightly, and it just kind of pulls it down. It's a slow process.
Yeah.
But
try to get
don't
a
just
tube.
dump it in there.
You're right. Yeah. Try to get a tube that will go down to the bottom of your bucket.
Yourself a siphon, or just have a little ball valve.
A ball valve,
something like that
on your bucket.
So there's some troubleshooting. There's some things, but guys, if you've made it this far and your beer starts fermenting, it's gonna be fine.
It's probably gonna be okay,
unless your temp goes way high or way low. You've made beer.
Yeah,
beer has been made. You're gonna carbonate it. You're gonna enjoy it. We could talk beer, and actually, this brings me to the next topic. Per some requests on our comments and stuff, we're gonna get to the point where we start shortening some of our videos.
Right,
but we're gonna supplement that, guys. We're starting our podcast soon, so be on the lookout. It's gonna be at handy. Homebrew.com, and you can download our podcasts, and they'll be, we'll take your questions, we'll answer them on there, and we'll be able to ramble a little bit more.
Right.
We want you guys to watch these videos quick. We want some sweat shorts in there so you guys know about equipment and stuff. We're going to talk more about ingredients, but we want to be able to ramble, and we don't want to take up too much of your visual time.
Right.
So a lot of good suggestions out there, guys. We really appreciate it. Be on the lookout for that. Next couple weeks here, we're going to start recording that up. We're going to have a real fun time doing it because we get great comments from you, the fans.
The fans.
Now, it is time for what, Matt Paulson?
Pints and Picks!
We have a very special Pints and Picks today.
Oh, we do?
We do. Our guys over at Brews have filmed a very special Pints and Picks for us. So we're going to check them out, see how they're doing. This has been episode 11. We've been talking about fermentation. We making beer. Let's watch our buddies at Brews and Pints and Picks. Cheers.
Not fermentation experts.
Just fermentation enthusiasts?
I am Dave.
I'm Dustin.
Tom. Kyle's behind the camera, and we're with Brews, and this is our first segment of Pints and Picks with Handy Homebrew Network. What we're going to pair together today is a Norwegian film called The Troll Hunter. I think I'm the only one here that's ever seen it.
Yep.
You need to drink this with it. This is Espresso Oak Aged Yeti Imperial Stout from Great Divide in Denver. Not only does it have Yeti on it, and which pairs well with the trolls in the film,
it does.
But this beer is aptly named because this is a robust behemoth of a beer. And when you're watching a film with all these humongous smelly trolls causing havoc, likewise things are going to be happening inside your mouth when you drink this.
It's a big beastly beer.
It is. It is robust and powerful, just like the trolls in the movie.
It absorbs all light that touches the surface.
Dark, nothing coming through.
Yeah, it's like a black hole.
Yeah, it's like a black
Nothing's
hole
coming through there.
A little bit of light brown head, but it doesn't stick around very long.
And I'm guessing the head is not sticking around because of the oils in the coffee. Aroma's very heavy on the coffee.
Oh, so the coffee, definitely.
It smells great.
Yeah, try it out. Strong coffee presence. A little bit of a smoky presence too. Probably from the oak barrels or oak chips they used.
Yep.
It could be a marriage of the oak and the dark roasted grains.
You could feel the alcohol as well.
Yeah, it's quite strong. It's in your face like a troll too.
Like a troll or a yeti. So definitely, if it's still on Netflix, check out Troll Hunter. I hope you know how to read because it's a foreign film. And go ahead and enjoy a big fat bottle of this when you're doing it. So Dustin and Matt, thanks for having us on the show. And if you guys can find this in your neck of the woods, go ahead and give it a try. Let us know what you think. Cheers.